Hey everybody, this is Miss Amy here, and thank you for joining me today. We're going to create, if you can see behind me, this cool looking polar bear. We're going to create a polar bear out of chalk today. So these are what you're going to need for today's project: a piece of black construction paper. You will need a piece of white chalk. I'm using white pastel chalk, but you could use regular white chalk that comes in those little boxes you buy at the store. Those will work too. You will need a black oil pastel and a white oil pastel. Some Q-tips, a handful of Q-tips, and a little cup of water, as well as some paper towels handy. And with this project, we are going to use a reference photo. So we have a reference photo that will be available for you on our website to download and use for this project. So let's get started for this fun polar bear. So with this polar bear, we're gonna create values, and values are what the light areas and the dark areas in art is. That's why I only printed out a black and white picture. And as you can see, there's some really dark areas and some really light areas. And those are values. So what we're going to do is we're going to create our values in black and white to create our polar bear today. So, and usually the lightest areas are created where the light is shining the most on an object. So the sun is probably shining from this direction and it's hitting this part of our polar bear. The darker areas over here and underneath are shadows created by the polar bear himself. So his head is creating a shadow, his nose is creating a shadow right there. So that's why those areas are darker. So let's get started. We're going to take our chalk, our white chalk first, and we're just going to kind of sketch the outline of our polar bear. And when I start my polar bear, I usually start the eyes kind of in the middle. So I'm just going to draw two curved lines right here. And then I'm going to add same line but the opposite direction underneath. Okay, then I see he's got kind of a square nose. So I'm just going to make a little square nose there. And I am not going to color inside those areas because I want those to be black, the dark color, like in my picture here. So I'm just not going to color those in. And so then I'm going to draw his head, and I'm using this as my guideline to get the shape of his head. I don't want to make it exactly necessarily like this picture. Pictures are used for references, or meaning if we're not quite sure the shape of something, we can look at a picture to see the shape. But we never want to copy a picture we have or something exactly because that's someone else's artwork. Okay, so I am just going to kind of put a curved line up here for the top of his head. And then he's got some curved lines for ears. And then he has a curved line coming down for the side of his face. Same on this side. It kind of ends in a kind of a curved point. Not quite a triangle, but like a point down there. And then that's his nose, but he also has a little mouth area, kind of the snout mouth area. So I'm just going to draw, as you can see in my picture here, see he's got that little mouth area. So I'm going to create that there with a little line. Okay. And then instead of his body, I'm going to make just a couple lines off the side of my paper representing his big body. So that's how I'm making mine a little different from the picture that I had. So now that I've got the basic outline of my polar bear, and we're drawing with chalk, and don't worry, because we can, if you have a line on your paper that you don't like, don't worry, I'm going to show you a cool trick to remove some of the chalk later. And you can always adjust it as you go. So don't worry if it's not quite how you want it, okay? So now as I'm looking at my picture, I'm gonna just color in the lightest areas of my polar bear with my white chalk. So I see on his nose that let's see if I can get it up here so you can kind of see it too if you're following along with me. So I'm just going to color some white. He's got white on, a lot of white there on the top of his nose, probably snow that's up there. Maybe he's been sniffing around in the snow. He has a white chin, so I'm going to color that white. And the bottom of his mouth is a little white. And then on the side of his face, the side of his face is white, so I'm going to go ahead and color that white. And I kind of go in the shape of his face. I don't want to color this way because the shape of his face doesn't go that direction. So I'm going to always color in the direction of his face. Now he has some dark areas inside his ears, so I am not going to color those. I'm going to leave those. So just where I see a lot of the white. And the same with this other ear over here. Got some dark inside there, so I'm just going to leave that. Okay, he's got some white on above his eyes too, and above both eyes. Now it kind of comes down into his nose, but it's darker on this side, so I'm just going to barely put some chalk there, just really super lightly. So barely covers that because that's kind of darker, and I can adjust it later, but I just don't want to put hardly any chalk there. And then I'm going to put some more chalk, white chalk on this side. Now his nose underneath here is dark too, so I'm not going to put white there either right now. And don't worry that your black paper is showing through. I'm going to show you a trick to get rid of that also. All right. And then on his back, he's probably where the sun is hitting right here will be lots of white. Now I'm not going to color all the way down. I'm going to leave that little bit of black there just so we can tell where his ears are. And I am not going to color all of this because I'm going to blend. And when I blend, I can take that over here too. So he probably has some white down here, but then it's probably going to be dark over here where the sun isn't quite shining. So I'm not going to add very much chalk over there. I'm just barely touching my chalk on my paper here. Because I don't want a lot of white there. And if I add too much white, I can remove it later to make it even darker. If I think it's too light, I can remove that chalk later. So don't worry if you feel like you've put too much chalk on, we can fix that later. All right, so I have my basic chalk added to my polar bear. So what I'm going to do now is take my finger and I'm just going to blend that. I'm going to rub it in so I get a nice smooth hair look to my polar bear. Plus it's going to fill in all those little black parts of my paper that are showing through. So go ahead and you just want to blend all of that. This is why we have our paper towels. You can wipe your finger when you're done because your finger will be all full of chalk. And if you get some in the eye, don't worry. We're going to fix the eyes later too. So not a big deal. I think polar bears are fun. This is kind of a realistic looking polar bear. There we go. Blend that all in. Nice. Okay. So I have mine blended. Getting a little finger. You can turn your paper around if you need to. I have fingerprints on mine. Chalk can be a little messy. If your mom's around and has some hairspray at the end, you can spray it with a little hairspray. That will help help it not be so messy. Not the pump spray, the spray like in a can. that will be helpful. All right. So I've got my white on there, but you know what? I need to make some little darker areas. I need to remove a little bit of my chalk just to make a little bit more darker areas, and see how he's got some hair here that's darker inside his ears. And I want to remove a little bit of that chalk. So this is how we're going to do it. We're going to get our little cup of water out and some Q-tips. And you're going to dip your Q-tip in the water and just wipe off the extra. And then you can just rub those areas where you want to remove some of the chalk. Okay? And as you do that, chalk's going to come off on your Q-tip, which is fine, but then it's going to get real dirty with chalk. And then you want to just switch to the other side of your Q-tip. Okay? Now, if you happen to take off too much chalk, you can fix that later by just putting some chalk back on. That's what I like about this project, is you can take it off or add it depending on if you take off too much or not enough. Okay, so along his face here, and then underneath here, he has a little shadow, I see. So I'm just going to barely rub off some chalk there. Not a lot. I'm not going to take a lot off. And then here, I'm just rubbing it lightly to take off some chalk. And going in the direction that his hair. This is where the picture is helpful, because I'm going in the direction that his hair is going. And then he had some dark along here. All right, let's see where else. He had a little bit on the eye right here. Maybe a little bit. See, I'm looking at my picture where I see a little bit of darker. So I'm just trying to take off some of the chalk with my wet Q-tip in those little darker areas. And just very lightly over here, because this is the part where the sun is shining, so it's just very faint that we're going to take off some of that chalk. And then underneath where his head is creating a shadow, we can take off a lot more there. And I'm going to get a new Q-tip because that one was dirty. So I'm just going to go along the head, right where the head is creating the shadow. It's going to be the darkest there. And then when you get it farther away from the head, the shadow won't be quite as dark. So I may take off more chalk here and then less chalk over here. And how I take off less chalk is I'm just not pushing as hard on my Q-tip. I'm just barely rubbing it. So I'm just taking off some of the chalk, but not all of it. Leaving a little bit there. There. And so now I even have different values. I have a really, really dark black, a really light white, and some different kind of grays in between. That just makes my picture look even more realistic when I have those different values in there. All right, so when you get where you like your bear and you've taken some off, we're going to go back through and we're going to highlight and add some black to our bear. So I'm going to set that aside. This is where we're going to use our oil pastel. Okay, we're going to take our oil pastel and we're going to go over the real dark black areas on our bear just to make them even darker. So I'm going to go ahead and fill in his nose even darker. So I have that nice, really dark black there. And just maybe directly under his nose, because it's not quite as dark around the sides there. All right. And then I'm going to do the same with his eyes. Color them in dark. were the really dark areas. And then maybe a little bit inside his ears, but not enough, not a lot. Maybe even look like little hairs in there for him. Little, that will look cool. All right. And then maybe follow where his mouth might be is a little dark. So I'm going to just color that a little bit. All right, and then I'm going to take my white oil pastel, and I'm going to add make the lighter areas even a little brighter with this white oil pastel. So I'm going to go ahead and add some to the top of my nose here, just to make that look like, it looks more like snow on his nose there. I'm going to give him a little dot on his eye where the light is reflecting, and that makes him look more real also. And then maybe where the sun is really shining off his hair, like here he's got some really light areas where the sun is reflecting. I might just do some short little lines here so it looks kind of like fur, and then just make those a little brighter. Above his eye he had some where the light is hitting, and then on his forehead where the light is hitting, and along the side here. There. And you can also, if you don't have a white oil pastel either, or a black oil pastel, you could use a black color crayon. That would work. And then you could just take your chalk, and you could use your chalk to make the lighter areas rather than your oil pastel. You could use your chalk to just really make that nice and whiter too. So either way, you can use what you have to create this polar bear. You could use a white crayon too if all you had was a crayon. So, and then always I'm gonna add some more and maybe blend it a little bit. Now this polar bear could take you a little bit, because if you really want to take your time and work on them, you can really create a wonderful light and dark areas on your polar bear. So the longer you spend making light and dark areas and carefully doing that, it's going to look good. Just take your time. There's no reason to hurry through that. And this is where the reference picture is nice, because it'll help you really see where those light and dark areas are. So there we go on his forehead, a little bit more on his head. All right, and then definitely right here, there's probably more white, because that's really where the sun is hitting. I might even add some with my oil pastel there. There. So that's basically how you create your polar bear. And if you get chalk prints on your black part of your paper, just take a clean Q-tip with some water on it, and you can go over that and remove that chalk from the paper and clean those fingerprints up. And you can clean up the edge of your bear and just make that look really nice if you want. See how it removed those fingerprints? It's a pretty cool trick. All right. So that is how you create our polar bear with values. So hopefully you'll have a fun time with this project. Feel free to send me a picture of your finished polar bear, because I would love to see it. So thank you for joining me today. Bye-bye.